Parshas. Okay, Parshas Vayishlach. So the Torah starts off the Sedra with Yaakov letting Esav know that he's returned from Lavan, and Yaakov gets a message that Esav is coming with his army, and Yaakov is frightened. And Yaakov prepares himself for the confrontation with Esav. And Chazal tell us that he prepared himself l'durin u'letfilu u'mulchama. He prepared himself with an offering to Esav, a present to Esav, and with prayer, and he prepared himself ultimately for war. Seems simple from the simple psukim that it never came to a battle. There are midrashim that say later on, many years later, when Leah died, so there was a military battle between Yaakov and Esav, but the simple reading of the psukim imply that it didn't come to that. Although there was that fear, and it could be, as the Medrash seems to indicate, that Esav's intention, original intention, was to wage war against Yaakov. Now, I was initially troubled. Why is it that Chazal tell us that he prepared himself l'durin, to an offering, a present, v'letfila, for davening, and for milchama, and for war? Why is durin mentioned first? And I think the simple reason is that, and it seems to me that there's a mistake that goes on today. I think I mentioned the last week, certainly, I don't remember if I said it in this year or I said it in other shiurim, that Rabbi Bear, the Bircha Shmuel, so once one of his Talmidim became very sick, and the other Talmidim came into his house to inform Rabbi Bear about the severe nature of the illness of his Talmud. And Rabbi Bear took out a Tehillim, and he instructed his Talmidim what Tehillim to say. And then, as the Talmidim were walking out, he said, don't forget to talk to the doctor. In other words, you shouldn't have the attitude that all we have to do is say Tehillim. And there is such an attitude today that many have. Of course, it goes without saying that the recitation of Tehillim, davening for the mercy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is essential. And without the help of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we cannot succeed. But we can't forget to talk to the doctor. And in our situation today, the war in Gaza, and it's not just the war in Gaza, it's a mistake that everybody is making. It's a united front against the Jewish people, both on the north and on the south, and probably on other sides as well. So we need the Rachmanas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but we cannot forget the doctor. We cannot forget the generals. We cannot forget the soldiers. There is an attitude that those who sit and learn, those who daven, really don't need the help of the soldiers. And sometimes that causes those who fight, when they see that their efforts, they're sacrificing their lives, they're putting their lives on the line, is not appreciated by those that they are helping, they begin to think that they don't need those who are davening. They begin to think that they don't need those who are learning. It's time to realize that we all need each other. If there is a problem about the drafting of yeshiva boys, that problem is compounded by the attitude that we don't need the soldiers. It's compounded by ignoring the facts of life. Did the boys in Hebron in 1929 not need military help? They were sitting and learning. And they were killed. How many times have terrorists go into shuls, into Beis Medrash, and kill some of the biggest lumdim, people whose lives are dedicated to Torah? But there is a naive and stupid attitude. We don't need the soldiers. We don't need the protection. They need it. We have to change the attitude. We have to change the attitude from both sides. But you have to change your attitude first, and then work on changing somebody else's attitude. I remember a number of years ago, I went to Menachem Oval, a cousin of mine, whose husband passed away. And the brother of the Nifter, who lived in Eretz Yisrael, was there. And he started complaining to me. And he was I think he was observant. His brother certainly was observant. And he started complaining to me about the fact that his son has to serve in the army. And his rabbi's son in Eretz Yisrael, the rabbi of his shul, the rabbi of his community, And he apparently seemed to have been somewhat close with the rabbi. It wasn't a situation where he didn't know the rabbi, where he had nothing to do with the rabbi. He knew who the rabbi was, he clearly knew who the son of the rabbi was. Doesn't have to serve in the army. And I said to him, I think the attitude is not, I think that if they would express their appreciation to you or to your son, there could be a sense of recognition, of needing, of each one needing the other. And his response to me is, as I get older, I can always learn something new. It didn't dawn on him to think that way. But why didn't it dawn on him to think that way? Why didn't he think about such a possibility? It's so obvious. But the reason was because no one had that attitude. It was either or. When soldiers who are dedicating their lives to save the Jews come into a frum area and they're attacked, what attitude are they giving? Where is the hakaras hatov? Hakaras hatov of giving one's life over. And until we learn that we each need the other one, there's going to be this confrontation. Why don't Rosh Yeshivas come out with a public statement urging their Talmidim to learn more and to daven on behalf of the soldiers that are helping them? And I don't just mean in time of war. The reason is because they're scared. They're scared that people will look up to the soldiers, that people will recognize what the soldiers are doing for them. They have to make the soldiers as the bottom of society. And this is based on discussions that I have with friends who do not share my attitude. Some would say, we have to make concessions. Why do they want to make concessions? Because they seem scared that the longer the fighting takes, the longer the war takes, the more people might come to understand their dependency on the soldiers. And they want to fool themselves and have their Talmidim fool themselves. They think we don't need them. And Yaakov Avinu had a different approach. He probably would not have made it to the Moetzes Gdolei Torah. Yaakov Avinu's approach was Durin. What is Durin? You could say bribery. I think of it in terms of something else. A number of years ago, there was a dispute about the territories that were captured, the West Bank, whether it should be given back or it shouldn't be given back. Of course, there were those who said it shouldn't be given back because giving back territories is Yarog Val Yavor. But those weren't the main opinions. The main opinions was from the perspective of Sakonos Nefashos. What is contributing? What will make a greater sakana, and what will relieve to a greater extent the sakana? Would making concessions, giving back territory, alleviate and diminish the sakana, or will it increase the sakana? Increase the danger. And you saw, without going into the details, and I'm not going to take a position right now, that's not the purpose of this year. But I want to explain what I think the source of the disagreement was. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe was probably the leading proponent of not giving back territories. I don't believe that the Lubavitcher Rebbe would not have been in favor of giving back territories if we weren't sure, that we would have a peace. But the Lubavitcher Rebbe's feeling was, and with some justification, that when we give back territories without any real guarantees, what I mean by real guarantees? Real guarantees means that we know that the agreement is going to be enforced. But once we give back territories, they have those territories. And then they can violate the agreement. And we know, unfortunately, that we can't rely on the United States, on those who brokered the deals. Sometimes, almost immediately after the treaties were made, there were violations of the agreement. I think in the original peace agreement with the Palestinians, there was an understanding that the terrorists will be turned over to Israel. That never happened. So they made believe for a while that they'll arrest the person. First of all, that wasn't the agreement. And secondly, it's even to this day, I'm not talking now about Hamas. I'm talking about the Palestinian Authority. that people thought are so innocent. They give money to the families of the suicide bombers. They're encouraging terrorism. My grandfather used to say, we say, Bake Shalom v'Rodfehu. And most translate Bake Shalom v'Rodfehu, the populist use of those words is search for peace and run after it. My grandfather would say, Bake Shalom v'Rodfehu, search out the peace and then run after it. Make sure it's a real peace. If it's not a real peace, it'll just be conducive to more war. In our own situation, of course, that wasn't the situation that my grandfather was dealing with. My grandfather passed away in 1941. There was no state of Israel. And I'm not sure, probably was talking about possibility of peace treaties during World War II. There were probably discussions then. But the problem is there are no assurances. And I'm convinced that had there been real assurances, and I don't know what real assurances there could be, that it would bring peace. Many people who were opposed to the giving back of territories, if there would be a sincere peace, might have had a different approach, a different perspective. But the Lubavitcher Rebbe, in explaining his view, if my memory serves me correctly, he emphasized very much the danger that would happen as a result of the giving back of territories without real guarantees. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe once said, he said, yes, because at that time, though my uncle had suggested that when he said that when we have a shaila about whether a person could fast on Yom HaKippurim or cannot fast on Yom HaKippurim, we talked to a doctor. And he suggested that the doctors in this case are those who, in the government, the leaders of the government. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe, while he agreed, seemed to have agreed, that we have to talk to the people who are the experts in the field. He said, but the ones you really have to talk to are the generals. The generals, not the diplomats. You have to talk to the generals. And he says, and you have to talk to them in private, because ultimately, the generals are the ones who are dependent upon diplomats. They're dependent on the prime ministers. They're dependent on the members of the cabinet. Publicly, they might not disagree with those who have a different perspective than they have. And you have to get privately what they really feel. And I think my uncles felt, this is my own feeling, that ultimately diplomacy plays a big role. And of course, I think at one time he even mentioned about Israel's need of support from the United States. You know, it's easy for people, and I hear it all the time. Oh, we shouldn't listen to what the United States has to say. We should just go in. I mean, I even heard one person say we should drop an atom bomb. You know, it's easy for people to say. When something's easy for people to say, they talk without thinking. So my uncle felt that those who are involved in diplomacy, they're acquainted with the military situation. And because the generals don't focus on the dependency of the state of Israel on the United States, they don't focus on the role. And of course, it shouldn't play the major role that public relations has, but it does play a role. Not only does it play a role in terms of the support, the military support that Israel will get, but unfortunately, it plays a big role, certainly long term, on the attitudes of many Jews. I always mention, after the 6-Day War, hardly anybody would have suggested that large chunks of the captured territories or the liberated areas, whatever you want to call it, should be given back. But after hearing time and time again about the opinion of the world that Israel is not acting properly, that it's acting as it's the act of liberating the territories in a war that was started by the Arabs, that was started by Nasser, with the aid of Houthant, who was the Secretary General of the UN, that Syria and Jordan and the other Arab countries played a role in, initiated it with their threats. People begin to think, Jews began to think, hey, maybe we are occupying territory that really should belong to the Palestinians. Minhag HaYehudim, I always mention, Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, that the attitudes and the customs of the nation, of the Jewish people, are influenced by the attitudes of the nations around them, by the people around them. This group, Jewish Voice for Peace, to me, they seem as mental misfits when you look at them. And I don't know that they're Jewish. Maybe they are. There were capos in Europe also. At least the capos perhaps had the rationalization that they were saving their lives. These people don't even have that rationalization. They think they're great humanitarians when they support those who put babies in ovens, when they support those that rip up women and take the baby out of their womb. They think they're liberals. They are liberals. They allow for these type of things to do that mankind would not have allowed before. So we have to be concerned. Unfortunately, the attitudes that exist among the nations of the world has an influence on the Jewish people. And the more Jews that are against the policies of Israel, the weaker Israel becomes. And you should know, they know that. And the fools play into their hand. You think all of the protests that are happening in the college campuses wasn't planned before October? All that was part of the plan. The only thing is, it had a negative effect on them also, because some Jews who might have joined the people who are liberally inclined to allow the murder of Jews, to support those who act in an inhumane manner in killing Jews, in torturing little babies. I've come to realize that we're not just dealing with anti-Zionism, we're dealing with anti-Semitism, and that affects their lives. And of course, the mental misfits don't realize that. Don't even realize it now. And when they'll realize it, it'll be too late for them to do anything about it. And so, but reality is reality, as bad as it is. So what we have to do is we have to combine the perspective of diplomacy together with the military perspective. And I think that this is what Yaakov Avinu did. During his negotiations with Esav, that was diplomacy. Muhammad, that was a military plan. And we have to combine the two of them. And to a certain degree, many people were upset about Israel making this temporary lull. And I understand the reason for it. I understand the reason of those who were upset. And I was actually very impressed. I talked with fathers of those whose sons, in addition to their learning Torah, are serving in the army. Some in the southern border, some in Gaza, and some in the northern border. And they told me, I found it very interesting, they told me that they consider it a mistake. On the other hand, I understand why people would say, because of work pressure, because of our dependency on the United States, so we have to make a temporary lull. Of course, there can't be what you call a complete ceasefire unless there are real guarantees. And there probably cannot be a real guarantee without the end of Hamas. And I don't know to what degree we can rely on the Palestinian Authority either. There's such an attitude like they were tzaddikim, Rishon Gmurim, Rotzchem. But we have to combine the diplomatic approach together with the military approach. And the doctors have to, this is the big problem today. The big problem today is that you have a different doctor for every organ in the body. And with the exception of a few hospitals, there's no coordination. And when one doctor advises, is a negation of the advice of the other doctor. There are certain hospitals that they have a team effort, that the doctors work together. But most doctors, most hospitals, it's each man for himself. And ultimately, the one that has to do the coordination is not the medical professionals, but the patient who understands medicine the least. And that's, I think, the problem we're facing today. We need professionals. And I think to some degree, we do find ourselves in that situation, that they view it from both the diplomatic perspective and the military perspective. It's L'Duran and it's L'Milchama also. It has to be viewed from both perspectives. But the tefillah is necessary in either case. L'Duran ula tefillah ula milchama. The Duran diplomacy will only work with tefillah. But you can't forget the doctor, as Rabbi Baruch said. And milchama certainly requires tefillah. Certainly requires davening. But it requires that we should have respect and recognize the mesiras nefesh, the contribution that each person is making for Klal Yisrael, for the Jewish people. And only when we will cease criticizing the individuals who give their lives on behalf of the Jewish people, and will be able to be modal emes, then there will be some kind of respect, recognition of the need of both. And I think I've mentioned in the past that the mitzvah of Milchama, the Rambam, mentions that there are three Milchemes mitzvah, three wars of mitzvah, as opposed to Milchemes Rishus. One war of mitzvah is Milchemes Amalek, the war against Amalek. One war of mitzvah is the war against the 7 nations. And these don't apply today at all. There is no Amalek, no nation of Amalek today. There is the Shiva Amimim, as the Rambam says, Avad Zichram. But there's one Milchemes mitzvah that applies even today. And that Milchemes mitzvah is Milchemes Yisrael Miyad Tzor Sheba Aleichem. And I think there are 2 text readings in the Sefer HaMitzvos of the Rambam as to whether a Milchemes mitzvah, a war of mitzvah, requires the consent of the Urim V'Tumim. And some want to suggest that according to the Gersa, according to the text, that a war of mitzvah requires the consent of the Urim V'Tumim, of the breastplate that the Kohen Gadol wore, that questions that faced the nation were in what approach to take was inquired from messages that were received by the letters shining or standing out. Giving an answer. Should we go to war? Shouldn't we go to war? Divine messages were received through the Urim V'Tumim, through the chest plate of the Kohen Gadol. And there is a textual reading in the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvos that applied, that requirement was necessary even by a war of mitzvah. So those that suggest that therefore today there is no war of mitzvah, I am sure that when the Rambam, even according to that textual reading, which is not the main reading in the Rambam, that a war of mitzvah requires the consent of the Urim V'Tumim. That's talking where we go out to war. In war against Amalek, Shmuel told Saul to go out of war. You needed to get Rishus, permission from heaven to go out to war. If war to be waged against Shiva Amim, the 7 nations, you can't go out to war against them. But Milchemes Yisrael Miyad Tzor Sheba Aleichem, the war against the enemy that attacks them, there's no requirement of asking consent. We didn't go out to war. They went out to war. We are in war. Genocide. This is not genocide. The fools who are being used, screaming genocide and all of that stuff. If there is genocide, it's genocide by those who are going out to war. We didn't go out to war. For us, it's a war of defense. And we are defending ourselves against those who attacked us and those who supports them. Yeah, now people are screaming against Hamas in Gaza, but they were there parading with Hamas after their initial attack. The Palestinians and Hamas is one. Why are we fooling ourselves? And then take a look at this week's Sedra. Now, and all this, where do we learn out the war of defense against the nation that attacks us? I mentioned, my father says in Parshas Pinchas, Tzoros and Midyanim harass the Midianites, Kitzorim heim lachem, because they harass you. Mikan, this the Medrash Tanchuma, Mikan habar laharcha hashkem lahargo. If a nation attacks you, then they are rode from there. The nation is a pursuer. And whatever is necessary to do to defend yourself, the whole nation is a pursuer. And especially in a situation where the people give support to them, where they praise them for what they're doing, where they attend their demonstrations, their rallies, when they express joy of the murder, of the rape that was committed by their soldiers. But I think there might be, in this week's Sedra, another source. In this week's Sedra, the Torah tells us that about Shechem. Jewish people settled in Shechem. And Dinah, the daughter of Yaakov, was raped by Shechem, who was the son of the leader of the town of Shechem. It's probably named after the town. Hamor was the leader of Shechem. And then the brothers of Dinah, specifically Shimon and Levi, the brothers of Dinah, under the leadership of Shimon and Levi, suggested, was a plan to the people of Shechem. Shechem wanted to marry Dinah after he raped her. And the people of Shechem, so they said that marriage would not be possible unless the people of Shechem circumcised themselves to join the Jewish people, to join the family of Yaakov, to join the nation of Abraham and Yitzchak. And they consented. And then when they were in pain from the circumcision, so Shimon and Levi went in and killed the males of Shechem, and they imprisoned or took as slaves the women of Shechem. And the question is, and then Yaakov became very angry at his sons, especially at Shimon and Levi. He said, "You made me look bad in front of the nations." And later on, he talked about them being impulsive, and with their anger, they killed people. And the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim says there is a halacha of dinim that when Shechem kidnapped Dinah and raped Dinah, he violated one of the 7 Noachide laws. And as a result of what he did, he violated it was a capital offense. And because of that, there's a law of dinim that the nations are required to enforce the 6 other mitzvos. And they did not enforce. On the contrary, the people of Shechem gave Shechem support for what he did. Like the Palestinians who gave support to Hamas, who joined their parade when they dragged the body, a half-naked body of an Israeli woman. Some say that she was still alive at that point. And all the men went over there and were spitting at her. Because of that, the city of Shechem violated the law of enforcing the law. In a sense, they gave support to the actions that were done, and they assumed responsibility for it. My uncle always expressed, he said when he was a student in Germany, he didn't sense anti-Semitism. And at first, the acts of anti-Semitism that took place by members of the Nazi Party. But they didn't take action against them. And ultimately, they became part of them. And that's exactly what happened with the Palestinians. When you don't take action, my uncle said, you assume responsibility. And here, it's not only that they didn't take action. As a nation, as a group, they commended them for a good job done. Now, so because of that, the Rambam says they were all chayt misa. They all violated a capital offense. So the Ramban asks, so if that was the case, So why was Yaakov angry at Shimon the Levi when they killed out the people of Shechem? And my father suggested that when we say that the 7 offenses, the 7 prohibitions, the 7 laws that apply to a Ben Noach, that apply to non-Jews, are considered capital offenses, capital punishment is a maximum penalty. In other words, where it becomes necessary, the purpose is to enforce the law. And where it becomes necessary, you can mete out a capital offense. You can mete out capital punishment. But if it can be done through other means, lesser means, then it's preferable that it be done with lesser means. But since it was a capital offense, it wasn't considered murder. But Yaakov was angry because Yaakov felt that they did not have to use such drastic measures to enforce it. I want to suggest a different explanation. I want to suggest that who bears the responsibility of enforcing the 7 mitzvahs? The community, the nation, the officers of the community, the government of the community, the people who have an influence on the community and perhaps the makeup of the community. They have to enforce the law. But the Jewish people were just passing through. Yaakov and his family were passing through. They were going to return to Yitzchak's house. Yitzchak was bringing his family home. And he stopped by in Shechem for a short period of time. So they had no obligation to enforce the 7 mitzvahs. But we could suggest, if we take a look, when Shimon and Levi defended their actions to Yaakov, they said, "Hachazona yasas achosenu." Should we let them turn our sister into a harlot? What was their argument? Yaakov was saying, and what was Yaakov's argument? Yaakov said, "You ruined my name in front of the nations of that surround this area. They will come and attack us." And there's a medrash that later on they did come and attack. Ramban mentions that there was such a medrash. He has some doubt about the authenticity of that medrash. But he says it's very likely that the medrash is authentic. So what was going on? I think besides the halacha or the chiyuv, the responsibility of enforcing the observance of the 7 mitzvahs that is on the people that are part of the community, that is on the government of the community. We're not talking about one individual. On the people as a group, as a nation, as a city. Those who suffer at the hands of the violation of the Shiva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach can enforce the penalty in their self-defense. And that was the heter. That was the basis for Shimon and Levi and the other sons of Yaakov to engage in action against the people of Shechem. because they knew that if they didn't react, other people and the people of Shechem, time and time again, will attack the Jewish people. They will rape their daughters, their sisters, in the same way as the Hamas did just recently, in the name of being freedom fighters. So they did it. They felt they had an obligation to do it in self-defense, even though they weren't part of the town. But it was done against them. And the people of the town supported what was done. So they assumed the responsibility also, because they had a responsibility to take action. And they didn't. And instead of taking action, on the contrary, they showed support. And that's what they said. Should we let our sister be like a harlot? That the people will continuously take advantage of our daughters and our sisters. I think they felt that the town as such, that it was, if measurements were not taken against the people of the town who supported Shem in what he did, in kidnapping and raping Dinah, so they will be defenseless. And time again, this will happen over and over again. And Yaakov didn't really disagree with them. All Yaakov said, our heter is why. Why did you think you were allowed to do it? Because it was self-defense. We have to prevent this from repeating itself over and over against us. But you caused another problem. Now the nations surrounding us will attack us. You did it in a manner that will make us susceptible to other threats against our lives. In other words, you have to know how to do it. And you did it out of anger. And when you evaluate a situation, yes, there is what to be angry about, and we have to be angry. But we have to know what the repercussions are. We have to evaluate it rationally. It can't be kiva'apam har guesh. It can't be just out of anger. It has to be done with a proper evaluation. And I think that perhaps that would be another heter for this war, because the people in Gaza, Hamas, they supported them, just as the people of Shechem supported Shechem when he raped Dinah. So they bear responsibility. And the Jewish people, unless we take action against the people of Shechem, there are so many enemies of the Jewish people around us. The people of Gaza, the people in the north, the Arabs in the north, in Lebanon, they will do it over and over again. We will be defenseless. We have to let the world know there's a price to pay. It's part of the Shiva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. It's part of Dinim. So in addition to the mitzvah of Milchama Milchemes Yisrael Miyat Zor Sheba Aleim. The war of defense against the enemy that attacks them. I think that perhaps we could suggest, according to the Rambam, this was the argument, but where it's clear that this is necessary for the Jewish people, for the defense of the Jewish people, to set a standard that anybody that attacks the Jewish people will have repercussions against him. Then it's for the defense of the Jewish people. And we're allowed, not only allowed, but we're required to go in. We're not killing them because we want them dead. We're killing them because we want to live. And sometimes that is what the issue is. But it has to be done with looking at a double perspective, the perspective of diplomacy as well as the military perspective. You have to combine the two together, just as Yaakov did. L'duran u'Muchama, but both of them need tefillah. Both of them need the help of heaven, and we have to plead with Hakadosh Baruch Hu to help us and to help Klal Yisrael in their efforts of both diplomacy and war.
Does anyone have any questions? Please put it in the chat. As part of the ceasefire negotiations, would it be appropriate for the Israeli military to demand all the Gazans undergo circumcision?
Please. No. Okay, it was clear that they really didn't want them to become Jewish. That was just part of their plan.
I think your father mentioned in 1987 when he gave his Torah Umada speeches at Yeshiva University that it would be a big Kiddush Hashem for Yeshiva University to open a school of diplomacy. He was talking about Ephraims and Menashes. I think we need big Ephraims and little Menashes or something.
Okay, but the diplomacy is only effective if we understand the importance of the military perspective.
Yeah, well. I'm not saying that you're saying different what he said, but he mentioned then that being able to have diplomacy would be of course, important thing.
See, that's you have to recognize the effect, what we do, what effect it's going to have. V'rapo yirape, by a doctor, it says, heal, you shall heal. And the question is, why to say v'rapo yirape? So I heard from my father, I think he said it in the name of Vayishlach. He says, v'rapo yirape, first you need a refuah from the makkah. You need a medicine from the disease, but then you still need a healing. You need a healing from the medicine, from the side effects of the medicine. And that's true when we take action also. Of course, we have to take action, but people just think, localize, take action against what they did. But you have to be concerned about the effect of the action. Yes, we have to take the action, but what are we going to do about the effect of that action? That has to be sof ma'aseh b'machshava tefillah. That has to be involved also, included in the thinking.
Okay, I don't think there's any other questions here. So I think we should hear good news and have a good week, everyone.